Is AI the missing link between business performance and skills development? Welcome to Learning Horizons, a series dedicated to reimagining learning, communicating, and collaborating in remote and hybrid workplace. What is possible? What could be done differently in the digital workplace to ignite creativity and performance? I am Gail Watson, Director of Think Skills, and in every episode, we aim to bridge the gap between technical innovations and human empowerment. Today, we're digging a little bit deeper in the always very hot topic of AI. And I am very happy to have with us Nahdia Khan. I met you, Nahdia, a few years ago when you were Chief Impact Officer at Mind Tools, and now you are running Tessier Consulting, and as well as, you're a very busy lady, as well as you are, I think, the chair of the Digital and Tech Advisory Group for the Central London Career Hub. And your work is particularly relevant to these conversations, I believe, because we are going to explore the cross-section between expertise in workforce skills and capability.
Yeah, absolutely.
So welcome, Nahdia. Thank you so much for your time. I remember you've always been interested in learning impact and how learning should support business performance.
Yeah.
How do you think the arrival of AI is challenging established practice?
So I think I'm excited to talk about this whole topic, Gail. So thank you so much for inviting me. And I think, when we think about skills mapping and we think about, workplace skills and all of that, it's one of those areas where L&D has always struggled to keep up. And I think AI is giving us a chance to do things differently. So if we think about the Future of Jobs report from the World Economic Forum last year, it said 44% of workers' core skills will change in the next 5 years. That's almost half. That's, you think about the challenge there. And LinkedIn's workplace learning report in 2024 said skills are now the currency of talent mobility. But the way most organizations still approach this is quite static. So it's spreadsheets, competency dictionaries, frameworks that get updated every 3 years if we're lucky. So the gap between the reality and the strategy is widening. And I think AI can help us with helping us close that. So there is a real opportunity with AI there.
Well, that is it's really exciting because actually mapping competencies in a relevant and dynamic way has always been a real challenge because
It
it's a very
has.
collaborative work and it's quite time consuming.
Yeah.
So it's wonderful to see that that AI can be really a tool to really
Yeah.
make huge progress on the front. Maybe we should clarify exactly what we mean by skill mapping. So do you
Yeah.
want to explain a little bit how does it work?
I will do. I will do. So, so there are kind of probably three levels to understand when we look at skills and competency mapping. So you've got something that a lot of people refer to as skills taxonomies, which are basically a hierarchical list of skills. And then you have competency frameworks, which adds behaviors and proficiency levels to that. And then you have the kind of the next level, which is what people are calling skills ontologies, which are the more modern AI-enabled versions, which map how skills interrelate and evolve dynamically. And that's the key part there. That's the power of what AI is enabling us to do is to iteratively think about how those skills are evolving dynamically. And we've been talking about competency models since the 1980s. It's nothing new. So people like Boyd's were tying behaviours to effective performance, and the EU, when they're looking at the whole kind of skills agenda, have been defining skills intelligence as a system for almost gathering demand and supply signals across the labour market. So we think about it from the perspective even of our own organisations, but if you think about it from a whole workforce planning piece, it's really important. And then groups like Fosway are now talking about skills clouds, essentially live dynamic frameworks powered by tech.
Wow, that is quite a lot to take on. So let's reframe it at the scale of a L&D business
Mhm.
persons trying to support their business in the best possible way. Am I right
Yeah.
in thinking that skills mapping would actually help capture where someone is at some point in their career and help them
Yes.
progress
Yeah.
and retain them by developing where they need to go further in their career? That's a
Yeah.
general idea, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, the most important thing that we need to know here, because you bring it quite rightly, go back to the L&D space, but we L&D can't own. I say we, still say that we can't own this alone. You know, you need HR and people analytics data. You need business leaders to link the skills to the strategy. So it is absolutely a partnership, and then employees themselves, because you know those bottom-up skills signals matter. You know, what are they actually telling us in terms of their own self-assessment, peer kind of feedback, and even, you know, other bits of data that are sitting in the business there. And then, you know, how do you map that across and think where the relevance is in that space for your organization? So it is absolutely, it's an I think Josh Burson called it, it's a skill strategy, is an enterprise initiative. It's not just an HR or an L&D project. And that's a really, really important thing to know and
But
understand.
it sounds a little bit daunting when you
Yeah,
say that so many
yeah.
people need to be involved. And when you say, and when you read other reports and you realize that employees are so stretched already. So where do you start? How do you start to make it palatable for the organizations, for everybody's involved?
Yeah, I think the key thing in terms of when you're thinking about this is start small and define your purpose. Like all of these things, you know, what problem are you really trying to solve? Is there a specific area of the business that absolutely needs this mapping more than other parts where the roles are a bit more clearly defined, or less open to that dynamic change that we're talking about? You know, start with the priority function, potentially not the whole organization, because that is daunting. You're absolutely right. And if we're saying that this has a much bigger scope and scale and group of people that are involved, you can't, you know, doing that whole organization would be really difficult. If you think about any kind of transformation that a business is going through, they wouldn't just try to transform the whole business at the same time. They would go for what is the priority area that we need to do. Again, I think, you know, think about your data lake as well. You know, where are you pulling that in from? And making sure that things like job profiles, performance data, employees, you know, you have access to that information. And then this is where, you know, AI comes in, because you can start to triangulate that data, you can start to analyze that data, query it, ask the right types of questions in terms of, you know, what is this kind of telling us about where our key critical capability gaps are, or where our skills are the strongest, or where our skills are the weakest and stuff. So those are the things that I would, and then it's really important, once you have that sense of a map of a particular area, is how are you going to validate that with, you know, parts of the business and leaders within the business, that does this feel right, you know? And that's where that bigger, broader piece that I was talking about earlier in terms of the skills being owned by the organization needs to come in, because that's where they start to influence and start to say, yes, that sounds about right, or I think we're missing something here in that space. So you see it as a very, as I said, a bit of a feedback loop and an iterative process there. And then you've got to keep it, I think, dynamic. You've got to refresh it more regularly, again, with what I call AI plus human checks, so sense checking with real people, as well as sense checking with, you know, the kind of data that you're feeding into your AI in terms of what's coming through on that, and more regularly understanding the patterns that are kind of emerging from it.
Wow, that is sounds like a dream when you describe it. Like it feels like it can really
Yeah,
change the way the business think about talent.
yeah.
But can I actually prompt you to go back a little bit back to data? Do you want to give us maybe some examples of data that may not come to mind to someone working on this mapping?
So I think you can think about what are I think your job profiles, your performance data, um, employee surveys, market data. And that's I come from, as you know, Gail, a history at Mine Tools of benchmarking. So even benchmarking, you're trying to get hold of really good quality benchmarking data around particular skills areas and stuff. I don't have them to hand, but when we do this live thing, I'm very happy to share some sources of external benchmarking data around skills, because I think that's quite important as well when you think about that. You will have access to some of that with within your HR teams in terms of reports that you can pull off both externally and internally. So I think it's a combination of the types of things that you can do. And the other thing as well is, remember, data and research and insights that you're pulling in don't necessarily, and this is where the enhanced, so you use AI for triangulating some of that quantitative data. But if you think of the qualitative stuff, which are conversations with people within your organization, creating smaller focus groups to really get under the skin of how people are doing their jobs, what they're doing today, and where they feel some of those gaps are. So you have two kind of sources of data coming in. You have what the kind of quantitative data is telling you, but you also have access to interviews and focus groups where you can run them if you're starting small and you're building a pilot, then you've got an opportunity to be able to do that and say, okay, let's talk to some real people about the point that I was making earlier about that kind of bottom up insight that you pull in from people in terms of who are the actual ones doing the jobs, and explaining where some of their challenges are.
And just before we go into the AI tech tools and look a little bit under the bonnet, I just would like to focus for a second on what you've just said about the people.
Yeah.
Like, how do you get the buy-in? Because you actually ask people to not work. I mean, not to do their paid work, right? How do you get the buy-in, and what is the minimum kind of number of meetings or inputs that you can get away with just to be mindful of their workload?
Yeah, so I think how you get the buy-in is by, look, a lot of people are quite, frankly, quite anxious and worried about whether they've got the right skills today and whether they're going to have the right skills in the future, right? So they are thinking about, how do I upskill myself? They do want to be guided by that a bit. So I think there is a bit of a vested interest in there, and probably now is quite a good time to be having this conversation, because rather than somebody telling you you don't have the requisite skills today or for tomorrow, you would rather have that conversation and understand what those skills are. Where is that mapping and what is that showing? So I think in terms of buy-in, you can get buy-in by appealing to the fact that there is a vested interest in it for them as well. Because what we're trying to understand is, let's take the fear out of it. We're not saying you're unskilled or you don't necessarily have the right skills. What we're saying is, you have some of the skills that we need today, but in order to build for the skills that we have tomorrow, there are some gaps, and we need to upskill you and we need to support you in that. So I think from an overarching perspective, you can get buy-in by appealing to what's in it for them. And what's in it for them is employment, obviously tenure where they are, but also in terms of when they move on from the organization, that they have the types of skills that are transferable and could be applied elsewhere. Now, in terms of time commitment, obviously in terms of the focus groups or the interviews, you would want to take a representative sample of a number of people to be able to say that is statistically relevant there. But you can run those quite rapidly, and you can almost use those groups, Gail, as a bit of a learning experience as well. So you can use those focus group sessions to help inform them of some of that skill, upskilling that you are hoping that they're going to be doing once you are clear about the types of ways in which skills are going to develop and move forward. So I think even on the time commitment side, they will want to get involved in something like that if you set it up in a way that shows value to them, so that they are learning as well as giving up their time. And that should also appeal to their line managers, right? Because that's the other hurdle you've got to go through.
Yes.
Is people are going to say, our teams are very busy, we haven't really got time to talk about this. And then you say, well, this is really important. And you give them a context about that. This isn't just HR asking for insight and data that's going to go nowhere. This is how we are going to use it. And I think that is always critical. Whenever we did the work, Mind Tools you mentioned, and then previous to that, towards maturity, and we were working with organizations where we were trying to pull people in to get that insight from them, we would always try to explain to them why this was important, what the context was, right? And how it fitted in with the bigger organizational plans that were happening in the organization, and the way in which the organization was looking to support them. So I think that's a real kind of way to do it.
So, and can I just, one last question on this topic. So when you gathered those employees that are representative and willing to help and excited about the project, so do you normally provide them with like, oh, we think that is the skills you're using now, and then, tell us right or wrong? How does it work?
Yeah, the way it would work is, Gail, is that you would spend a bit of time saying, yes, you would set the context and you would lay the scene and say, this is where we think we're strong now, based on the data we pulled together, the analysis we've done. This is where we're really strong. These are where the gaps are. This is what is important for our profession, for our industry, and with the benchmark. This is why this is important. And this is what kind of happens if we don't do anything, right? Because that's always the thing that you have to remind people, that there is a cost of doing nothing. Right? But there is also the cost of doing something which isn't valuable, of course, as well. So you would set that scene there, and then I think that is where you get that bottom-up view there for people to understand and to challenge and to say, I don't understand why this skill is important for us to have. We've always done the job this way, or we've always kind of approached it this way. Why is that going to be a skill for tomorrow that we really need to understand? And then again, like I said, that's where it comes back to that original point that I made, that the skills conversation can't just be an L&D, an HR conversation. It's part of a bigger business conversation, which says, this is the direction our business is heading. And if we're going to win in those competitive markets, or do well, or do this, then business leaders need to input into that as well, to help explain to them. It's like anything. When we did learner surveys, the most important thing that would come out is, if my manager tells me to do something, I think it's important, right? They were one of the biggest influences on them. And I think that is the case here as well. So that's how you would present it. And I think that then has a very different conversation to the fear of, if you don't upskill, you're going to lose your job, kind of thing, which is not helpful to anyone. And it's the same thing around the whole AI conversation that is doing the rounds at the moment. There's a lot of hyperbole there, which is just there's a balance in there somewhere. There are absolutely things that people need to consider around AI, but also you do need to put it proportionately to people and help them understand. So yes, skills are moving, and they're moving very fast, and things are happening, but we don't want people to think, the roof's about to fall in on their head.
Absolutely
it's not helpful to anyone.
Very true. And now let's move, you've just brought up the topic of AI. So how do we use AI, and also importantly, if your organizations with limited budgets, can you use tools like, I don't know, Gemini, Copilot,
You
ChatGPT
can,
to actually
yeah,
do that? So do you want to talk
yeah.
us a little bit about, how you work with AI and what sort of tools do you use?
Yeah, so I mean, I think the thing is, look, there are kind of what I would call three tiers of kind of tech. So there are AI-powered skills platforms that are out there, and there are
Yeah.
many of our vendor friends like Eightfold, Workday Skills Cloud, Skyhive. They're creating kind of live skill ontologies because a lot of data that's going into them. But the generative tools like ChatGPT, Gemini, Claude, they accelerate things like clustering skills and drafting frameworks. They can really, really help with that. And then, of course, it's really, really important that once you've done that, you're able to integrate into LMSs and LXPs, because that's the only way you're going to get to the learner, right? You've got to be able to translate what
Right.
you're pulling in through there into then your things. So you can absolutely use ChatGPT and Gemini if we just talk about very base level access, the tools that people have access to for drafting skills libraries. You can use it for clustering messy role descriptions, of which I've worked in organizations where they've got 50 job descriptions on something and on areas which all kind of look and sound the same. That's the kind of stuff that it's really good at in terms of really being able to rip that out. And then also checking external kind of signals around job ads, CVs, that type of thing. There's a real strong there. But you do have to be careful that, and as we know, all AI of these tools that we've talked about, they can hallucinate. And they're not domain specific, and they are based on the data that you're obviously putting in. So the best approach is that you kind of use that to create and draft those frameworks and those things, and then you validate through humans is probably the best way to describe it. So yes, there are real ways in which you can use AI, and I think it is one of those really fun ways to experiment as well in terms of that.
Well, thank you very much. So you make it sounds quite easy. Probably there is a lot more to it. But just because we could talk about it for hours, but unfortunately we don't have hours. So if you were giving advice to someone who is starting their journey
Yeah,
as an
yeah.
L&D, maybe an L&D person wanted to push the boundaries a little bit with their practice, where would you like to tell them to start?
I think I'd come back to what I said originally a little while ago, which is really define the purpose. What is the problem you're solving, especially when you're experimenting? When you're experimenting and you're starting off on something, it's really good to start small. And it's really good to focus down on something which you probably in the back of your mind have some sense, because some of this is about how do you build trust with it, right? And on an important topic like this, you want to be able to build trust with the AI. So if you start small and start with an area, the job descriptions is a really good example. You've got lots of different job descriptions, you've got lots of different ways of explaining the skills and experiences required for the same kind of job. Is that a really good place for you to start, to just be able to say, I want to be able to use the tools that I have, the AI tools that I have, to ask those critical questions. And that's an important thing, because it is the way you question it and the types of questions that you ask around it that will give you the most kind of useful information and thing around it. And that comes from the context of problem solving, right? If you identify what the problem is, then you can ask the AI the right question as well. And so they're kind of interlinked. So I think if you do that and you focus on something which is critical, but also an area where you've got your gut is telling you that we don't know enough, or we know some information but we're missing some information, it will give you the confidence to then be able to really push the boundaries of experimentation within the AI models that you're using. And then, of course, as I said, there are skills platforms that will do some of that for you. as well. But of course, that really does depend on what your budget is and what how important that is organizationally as a priority for your business in terms of the investment that they're going to be able to make. But I would start small. I would use the AI on a really meaningful problem, on an immediate issue, collect those signals, really think about, okay, what does that mean in terms of how we map that out? And then how do we take that and validate that with subject matter experts and leaders within the business to say, does this sound right? Right? Because that's how you're going to get there and do it. Because I come back to that original point you made, Gail. It is a really seismic task, right? No one is going to solve the skills challenge overnight. It's not going to happen that way. So sometimes when you're faced with these real, meaty issues, you don't know where to start. So starting small is how you build your confidence in that, and then start to think about, okay, if we find that out about this particular area and this particular, gap in skills, then what else can it do for us? How else can that link into other conversations that we're having within the business in the HR and leadership and transformation space within the business as well, in terms of how can we help inform that? Why is this information important? I think that's a big part of identifying the problem as well, is why is this critical to the business? Why do we need to know this? And that helps you build that business case around it as well, to say why this skilling up is important. And AI just allows you to bring that information together, and you will be able to pick up as you're doing it if I said, the term I used earlier, if it's hallucinating a little bit, or it's a bit off mark, or hasn't quite got it, then you ask it in a different way. And the way that we're experimenting with AI at the moment. So yeah.
Well, that leads me to my very last questions, I promise, even though I could keep you all day, but sadly I can't, which is, in terms of us, L&D people, to develop our own skills, because we love talking about other people's skills, but what do we need to do to become more performant in that field?
There is so much out there, right, Gail? There is so many different courses. There are AI courses for marketing leaders. There are AI, there's a tremendous amount of people providing training and understanding in this. And I think depending on your budget, on your scope, on the nature of your role, there are lots of places you can go. Obviously, even the large language model libraries are running their own courses. OpenAI Academy has a lot of free courses on there. Google has a lot of free courses on there. There are people. I don't want to name drop.
No,
people
I was more sorry. I was
courses.
more thinking about in terms of skills we should focus on as L&D people.
Yeah.
Without going into how we develop it, but yes.
Okay, right, sorry, understood. So I would say the biggest challenge that AI is facing at the moment, so I'm just flipping it a bit to say, is that a lot of the time it's the critical thinking that we put into the inquiring of AI that then yields those kind of results that come out. So AI, the kinds of skills that L&D needs to continue to develop are the ones of curiosity, critical thinking, challenge, constructive, kind of input into things that will enable the AI quality to be of high value. So I think you almost, it's not a shortcut way of saying, here's all of my information, now make it make sense for me. In order to get the value out of AI, you can't stop doing all of the great stuff that you've always done, which is have those difficult conversations, which is, help inform the conversation and the dialogue, and think critically and really get under the skin of what those issues are, because those will help you do that. If you just type in something very simple without any context and without any nuance and without any understanding of the issue, right? So we've all been doing some form of skills mapping and competency framework, so we know what some of the fundamentals are of that. So I think for anybody in L&D, whichever subject you're looking at, whether it's skills, whether it's impact, basic grounding of the principles and the fundamental understandings and learnings of that area are still going to be important, because that's the only way you're going to be able to train the model to give you the types of answers that you're looking for. So don't stop doing that. It is that human element of challenge and thinking critically and being curious is what helps us in our day-to-day job today before AI, and it will continue to help us in that. It's just you've almost got a companion alongside you, is probably the best way to describe it, to augment those skills you already have and should carry on developing and thinking about how you're going to continuously be curious and continuously be constructively challenging and critical thinking. So that's what I would say.
Well, thank you very much. And I like the fact that you're pointing out that if we don't put any valuable information, if we don't challenge back or push back, we're going to have something very beige, very tame, which is exactly at the opposite of what we want, which is more personalizations, more adapted to an individual situations. We can only do that if we're able to create the space and environment to get those data and questions, the answers, because a lot of people we're having the conversations with, and going back to the human element, they want the outcome. They don't necessarily want to spend a lot of time thinking about the challenges, and also they struggle sometimes to verbalize those challenges. It's not something, when you leave something days in, days out, we really have to extract them, ask powerful questions, ask very incisive point, so they can actually get us the information we need.
And if you just to finish off on that, Gail, you're absolutely right. But if you think about it, that asking and challenging and thinking time is what so many of us for so long have just not been able to have, because we're in the weeds, we're tactical, right? We're in our businesses, we're delivering. Where AI is really powerful is that it's giving you a bit of more bandwidth and space, because what you would have spent three times the time doing, you now have more time to talk to people, you have more time to validate, you have more time to pull that insight in and to have those bigger conversations that you've always wanted to have. But because there is a rush on doing something, or somebody has to do all of that work, that often gets truncated in terms of time, because you're spending all the time on the implementing and the analyzing and doing all of that. Well, as I said, if you make AI your companion in this, you've got that really great, rich time to tap into, to be able to then say, okay, what do I really need to know about this area of skills? Well, what's really the challenges that are out there, and how are we going to meet this kind of head on? It's giving you the space and the bandwidth, which is amazing.
I think it's a very positive end to this conversation. So AI is giving you the gift of time, the gift of thinking time, the gift of reflection. So it is something we definitely want to explore further. Thank you so much, Nahdia, for your time. We will probably add below the video some extra resources, maybe, Nahdia, that you touch on briefly during the conversation, to help our audience explore a little bit deeper those concepts. So thank you again for your time, and thank you for being part of Learning Horizons.
Thank you so much for having me, Gail. Thank you.